diminished urine output, GI bleed, altered sensorium, and breathing difficulty. Type 2 diabetes mellitus on OHA for the last 2 years, fairly well controlled. No history of any cardiac or renal illness in the past. History of knee pain on movement, both sides on and off since 1 year. Intake of etocoxib for knee pain for 1 week and 3 weeks ago. History of transient loss of consciousness 2 years ago. Neuro evaluation advice of carbamazepine, which he has been taking regularly for the last 2 years. History of fracture left femur 17 years ago. Open reduction, no transfusion. No smoking, or drug use. Social drinking for the past 15 years. Weekly 3 units. No non-consanguineous parents. He is married. Has 1 child, 13 years. On examination, weight is 82, BMI 25, mild icterus, bilateral pitching pedal edema, no stigmata of chronic liver disease, scar of surgery left thigh, abdomen, liver and spleen not palpable, shifting dullness. Liver dullness is
Please mute. Whoever has joined just now.
Liver dullness is 10, span is 10 centimeter, no bruit or hump, no enlarged back veins. Other systems are normal, no knee joint swelling or restriction of movements. Lab hemoglobin is 12.5, total count is 4,100, platelet count is 1.1 lakh. LFT bilirubin, total bilirubin is 3.2. AST, ALT 72 by 87. ALP is 108. Total protein is 6.4. Albumin is 3.1. FBS is 143. SBMC 6.8. Creatine 1.2. INR 1.8. PT is 25. Serum ferritin 786 milligram per deciliter. Ceruloplasmin is 29. SBSAG, ANA negative. SBSAG, ANA both negative. Anti-HCV is positive. HCV RNA is 2 lakh and genotype 3.
Okay, I think we are stopping at this level. Jian, you can have your own questions, but it's a short case. We'll finish in 15 minutes.
So, syndromic diagnosis, I would like to consider at the end of investigation, I would like to consider cirrhosis of liver with acute decompensation. Etiology, acute decompensation. Etiology, I would like to consider possibilities of alcohol-related liver disease, overlapping DILI, and HCV-related chronic hepatitis, complicated with ascites and pedal edema, jaundice with no evidence of hepatic encephalopathy, and coagulopathy is also present. Coagulopathy is present. No evidence of hepatic encephalopathy or renal dysfunction. The present symptom could be related to possibility of reactivation of chronic hepatitis C. Along with that, possibility of underlying CAM related can also be considered, and portal vein thrombosis because of an acute decompensation, and elevated serum ferritin is there. I would like to consider possibility of hemochromatosis which can be ruled out but with further investigation.
GN, Dr. Smith.
First of all, why did you make a syndromic diagnosis of cirrhosis? What
Because
made you think of cirrhosis?
At the end
And
of
one advice is that you have brought in a lot of differentials like chronic hepatitis, CAM, hemochromatosis. Don't bring in two portal vein thrombosis, etc., which is not necessary. Just give one or two causes, which is obvious here with the history. And continue. Why did you make a syndromic diagnosis of cirrhosis, first of all?
because the examination was showing a liver span of 10 centimeter. Because of shrunken liver, I considered the possibility of a cirrhosis in this patient. And with a chronic history of an elevated HCV level, more than 2 lakhs. So underlying and past history of blood transfusion. So and this could be an acute decompensation secondary to underlying cirrhosis.
A history was there was no history of blood transfusion, isn't it?
No, one blood transfusion.
Okay, even if HCV is there, why can't it be just a carrier of HCV?
Carrier, currently the HCV is elevated. HCV is more than 2 lakhs. So, and bilirubin is also elevated around 3.2 with INR of 1.8. So, there is evidence of a liver cell deterioration. So, possibility of an acute flare should be suspected.
No, do you have such flyers in hepatitis C?
No, no.
Then why did you made a
Okay.
Now, why can't it be acute liver failure? Or why can't it be acute and chronic liver failure?
Clinically, for ACLF, we considered in this patient, the bilirubin should be more than 5 milligram per deciliter. Along with that, the INR should be more than 1.5. Here, INR is 1.8. And within 1 month, there should be a decompensating event with ascites or other decompensating event. So, one is there should be a hepatic insult in this patient. 1 month decompensation, that period I am not sure. It is possible if the ascites has developed over a period of 1 month, but the initial presenting clinical symptom is ascites itself, not a jaundice. So we cannot say whether jaundice came first or ascites has came first.
Dr. Bijosh, what are the possible etiology, if we consider cirrhosis of liver, what are the possible etiology which are very evident in this case as from the history and lab findings?
The first is possibility of a chronic drug liver DILI can present as a cirrhosis if chronic intake history of oxcarbamazepine is there.
So oxcarbamazepine, is it known to produce chronic liver disease?
It can produce DILI phenotype. It can produce chronic. If undetected, it can go to cirrhosis of liver.
What type of liver injury would you get with carbamazepine? What is the R score? You've got all the values, no? What's the R score?
You want to go back?
Yes,
What's the R score? So what is the primary cause, you think? At the age of 43, what do you think is the primary cause for the liver disease? What would be the natural history for HCV, natural history for drug-induced liver injury? And what type of an injury do you get with carbamazepine?
In carbamazepine, you get a phenotypic presentation of acute hepatitis.
More cholestatic, no? Hepatocellular. You will not get it's not cumulative like amiodarone, not cumulative. Okay, Dr. Vinay Kumar is there. So any questions, sir?
Thank you very much. Well, I have a few. In fact, what is your syndromic diagnosis? I would like to have a syndromic diagnosis that the patient has got an ascites and lymphedema due to liver decompensation and portal hypertension. So that'll be my diagnosis, and the portal hypertension is due to what? So I think there should be a diagnosis there, I think you need to, if you say muffled here, the concept of muffled, I'd be very happy here. Because NAFLD versus muffled, the apostle concept of 2020 and the guidelines, muffled, you may be able to make combined diagnosis, a standalone diagnosis. NAFLD is an exclusion diagnosis. So here, if you say, we can say muffled and then HCV, the two etiology you can suggest, and then in the particular context, the content of alcohol may be very important that you may be able to highlight. And then you discussed about the serum ferritin. What is serum ferritin here? Serum ferritin, see the serum ferritin is a bit high. And what is it? Whether you may be able to go for a hemochromatosis here, or will you take it as an acute phase reactant?
Yeah.
So that may be very interesting. And then you made the statement that, the patient has no renal dysfunction, but the 1.2 of creatinine, probably you should be, I don't like the statement, But if you know the previous creatinine and if there is an elevation here, I am suspecting that the patient may be having an acute kidney injury here. This may be enough for that. And then, well, again, lab values are here, but you may be able to calculate your MELD and then CTP score. And then if you say that, that'll be very fine. So if you say that this patient has got a decompensated cirrhosis liver with the ascites and lymphedema, with the portal hypertension, and the patient has got so much of MELD, and CTP score is this, and the patient belongs to class, say, B or so, and the etiology being, I would like to say that muffled HCV, and then alcohol also, and then probably you can highlight the interpret your ferritin and creatinine here. So I think that would be my discussion.
And HCV, sir, HCV.
HCV definitely I have to consider here as an etiological feature here. Because in muffled HCV, and in that particular background, that the sort of alcohol he is taking here, as per the apostle guideline, it is significant here. So the alcohol definitely may be a cofactor here. Looking at the background.
Yeah.
B and C, but the less content of alcohol, will be significant. Apostle is there.
And probably with an elevated BMI and weight, he may be having fatty liver in the background. Also.
That's what I said, muffled. I think you have to discuss as muffled metabolic syndrome associated fatty liver disease rather than non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Because the beauty of apostle definition is that, you'll be able to make the combined diagnosis. It's a standalone diagnosis, metabolic syndrome associated fatty liver disease. I would like to have that sort of a diagnosis from you, because apostle gives that sort of diagnosis. So I think you may be able to score a lot of marks, if you put it this way.
Vijosh, how often you get no liver, no spleen, and hemochromatosis? How many cases of hemochromatosis have you seen?
One or two.
What is the usual presentation? Right? How often do you get a cirrhosis with no hepatomegaly, no splenomegaly? Be very careful. The ferritin here would be more of an acute phase reactant. In case it is a short case and they will say examiner has told, someone is giving you a clue to the diagnosis.
Okay.
And if you say that the serum ferritin is acute phase reaction and it's a marker of macrophage activation syndrome, I'll be very happy.
Exactly.
And I think in hepatitis C, there is a tendency for iron overload also.
Yes.
That also may be added to the picture.
Exactly. Yeah.
So investigation, any further investigation? Vijosh?
Quick.
Further investigation. Ferritin, I would like to do the transferrin saturation in this patient. Then ceruloplasmin is normal. Then
give investigation according to the priority rather than transferrin saturation as first.
Okay.
You already have so many investigations available. Now, for further decision making, do you want any further investigation? If so, in the order of priority and the reason for asking for that.
Okay. ammonia. I would like to look for ammonia because possible to roll regarding starting of the anti-hepatic encephalopathy measures or even minimal hepatic encephalopathy, we can start the patient on treatment. Then
one investigation is glaringly missing in this set of investigation. What is that?
Platelet.
Endoscopy was there,
no? No. Endoscopy was not shown.
Yes.
Okay, that is endoscopy to look for varices.
What do you want to confirm your diagnosis?
USG abdomen. It was not. I think USG abdomen I would like to do in this patient. We look for the liver, spleen, and the splenoportal axis. I would like to see along with ascites.
I think we can move on.
Yeah.
Serum iron binding capacity is 425. Transient saturation is 58. Iron quantification is 4 milligram per gram of liver tissue. Liver biopsy plan not agreeable by the patient. Any other investigation? I would like to do I will do the HFE genetic analysis in this patient to see whether it is a type 1, 1A or B patient, hemochromatosis. Ideally, C282Y mutation or H63D mutation I would like to do in this patient. In view of
mutation if it is negative.
Then a liver biopsy patient is not willing. So then other investigation.
Is the indirect method of iron quantification by MRI sensitive enough to make a diagnosis?
MRI iron quantification method is sensitive enough. It can indicate HIAC and HIE, hepatic iron index, can accurately predict.
But this is a mild elevation. Normally it's up to less than 2 and this is 4. I think above 4 to 8, I think must be there. I don't know exactly, but I think that is the value which people consider. And it has to be done with the standard format and all.
Dr. Vijay, sir, can I ask something?
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Vijay, would you consider phlebotomy as a method of diagnosing hemochromatosis in this patient?
Phlebotomy has role in, if it is a hemochromatosis related cirrhosis and ascites decompensation.
No, as for diagnosing hemochromatosis.
Diagnosing,
because patient is not willing for biopsy. Patient, as sir said, the genetic testing was normal. So if you can do phlebotomy, what will happen to the ferritin in a patient with hemochromatosis as against a patient without hemochromatosis?
With hemochromatosis only, the patient will improve. Without hemochromatosis, it doesn't have much.
So what will be the drop in ferritin with every phlebotomy? Supposing the patient has hemochromatosis as against a patient not having hemochromatosis.
The amount of drop of ferritin, I'm not sure, sir.
It is supposed to drop by 40 units.
What about hepatitis C in this case? It should be treated or not?
Hepatitis C should be treated, sir. It should be treated genotype 3.
How do you treat him?
Velpatasvir with sofosbuvir, I will start the patient for 12 weeks duration, and post treatment I will do an SVR of 12 weeks.
Is the patient having cirrhosis?
Cirrhosis, yeah.
Cirrhosis is there.
Okay, we have exceeded time, so we'll move to the last set of questions. Okay.
Can I make a point here,
Yeah, sure.
Well, I think what are the investigations, you need to go for a ascites fluid study here. Because that is the thing which will make a difference in this particular patient. You may be able to treat that, Then an ultrasound scan and then inputs on the ultrasound scan, whether there's any portal vein thrombosis, etc. here. And then etiological investigation, we have got some etiology. And then HCV diagnosis, how far is going to be beneficial for the management in this particular patient. is this patient a candidate for a phlebotomy here? So I think well, we need to go for ascitic fluid investigation here, and then ultrasound scan, and that is actually decisive for the management in this particular patient. And another question which is unanswered here so far is, how will you correct for BMI in this particular patient? Your comment on that. And what is the corrected BMI?
BMI in this patient, it is mentioned here, it is 25. Whether it's corrected, I'm not sure. But correction is given to the around 5, 10, and 15%, depending on mild, moderate, and severe ascites. And additional 5% is detected from the weight if there is bilateral period edema.
Okay. So he has bilateral period edema, shifting dullness, weight 82, BMI uncorrected 25.
About moderate. So how much reduction?
That is around ascites is moderate. So 10-15% of the weight I have to reduce, then calculate the BMI.
Okay. Any further questions? Can we move on? And
VT,
I think
VT, I think is a, like at the age of 43, suddenly someone blurts out with the diagnosis of hemochromatosis. I think I'll be quite wary. I'll be a little guarded that some clue, like, I mean, in a kindergarten case in the outpatient clinic and all, suddenly
this,
not come out with a ferritin. No?
I personally feel it's hepatitis C, and it must be some sort of iron overload secondary to that. Hemochromatosis is not
dangerous diagnosis with no hepatosplenomegaly, no other symptoms, no hyperpigmentation, hypogonadism, so diabetes. So many things are there. Patients are diabetic.
Must be secondary iron overload.
Is patient diabetic?
Diabetic.
Yes.
So recent diabetes?
2 years.
2 years.
2 years.
2 years. So how often have you seen at the age of 43 hemochromatosis presenting as cirrhosis?
It cannot be just hemochromatosis alone. There has to be multiple etiologies.
Yeah. If you make a diagnosis of hemochromatosis, you will fail, I'll tell you. Because it's very dangerous diagnosis. You have to discuss the way all the other seniors have said. You have to discuss alcohol, you have to discuss NAFLD, you have to discuss HCV, and keep hemochromatosis as a last possibility. It will not even come in the discussion. I don't know how you got the diagnosis. When I saw this case, I was just wondering, it's okay, cirrhosis liver. I have to consider all the possibilities, 43-year-old. I was wondering how to proceed with the diagnosis when the case was given.
It was to be considered, I think, as an acute phase reactant. That should be a safe way of wriggling out of the situation.
Exactly. You cannot give a diagnosis. How would you do phlebotomy in this patient with all anasarchic? He's got edema leg, he's got federalized this thing. Dr. Krishna Das asked, how will you do phlebotomy?
Yeah, if you are doing phlebotomy, you check the hemoglobin. If the hemoglobin drops, supplement hemoglobin. And second thing is, for every other time you take out blood, you are supposed to give albumin to maintain his albumin about 3 to 3.5.
Alcohol itself can cause iron deposit.
I think this is a very complicated case. Should have been a long case. I think we should move on.
We should move on and be careful.
Decompensated cirrhosis is a contraindication for phlebotomy.
Okay, go on.
Please mute. Somebody has joined recently.
Please mute.
Okay, we'll go to the next case.
But please just take home, I think very important, in the exam and all, please don't give a sudden diagnosis of hemochromatosis, okay?
Yeah, that is an important message.
That's all.
Great.
Do not come in your DD. If you got the DD, that means you've got a clue. That's it.
The MRI iron overload is very minimally increased. It's not a significant increase.
It's not
okay. So that has to be there. So just don't jump to the diagnosis of hemochromatosis.
Absolutely.
You may be tempted to diagnose that way.
Last. It's just one of the rare causes. Yeah.
Next
who's taking the next case?
Yeah, ma'am.
Who's it?
Good evening, sir.
Subhash, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, Subhash.
Subhash from Nainital.
Yes. Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, sir. And
good evening.
My case is 62-year-old male and manual worker until recently, and diabetes mellitus for the past 22 years, initially on the OHA, now on the insulin, and poorly controlled. Recent anorexia, weight loss, 5 kg in the last month, 3 months. Dull aching, upper abdominal pain for the last 4 weeks, increased since 1 week, and the almost persistent pain occasionally aggravated by the food and oral analgesia. No vomiting, no abdominal distension, no altered bowel habit, no jaundice. Regular alcohol intake from at the age of 25 years, 40 units weekly, and they stopped 6 months ago. History of pulmonary tuberculosis, 2 years back, treated for the 6 months and was on the daily drugs. Physical examination, that weight is 52, BMI is 16.8, vitals normal, no icterus, no pleurer, no pallor, no edema, no lymph node, no cutaneous lesions, abdomen scaphoid, liver palpable, 3 centimeters below the right costal margin. It is firm in consistency, no mass, and the no free fluid. Other systems are normal.
So summarize, please.
Sir, my patient is 62-year-old male, and he is a known case of diabetes for the last 22 years and was on currently on the insulin. Now presented with the that abdominal pain, which with the significant loss of weight and
I can go back if you want.
Yeah, sir, recent history of anorexia, loss of weight, and presented with the dull aching upper abdominal pain for the last 1 month, and which is increasing for the 1 week, and that was aggravated by the food, oral analgesic, and without any evidence of abdominal distension, altered bowel habit, jaundice.
Okay, so summarize. A 60-year-old person who was in the habit of taking alcohol in significant quantity for last 25 years, diabetic for 22 years, OHO now poor control, recent anorexia, weight loss, and persistent abdominal pain requiring analgesics, and no extra symptoms. That's it. What is your syndromic diagnosis? Which organ seems to be affected?
My syndromic diagnosis upper abdominal pain, most likely I would like to consider that benign versus malignant etiology, because the patient is having the significant.
Which organ seems to be affected? You have to locate the organ first.
Most likely, sir, that stomach,
Can it be liver? It's a continuous pain. There's a continuous pain, persistent pain. You want any more information? A pain that's aggravated by food, upper abdominal pain. Any other information you want? What are the organs?
Any early satiety and the bloat, ball rolling sensation?
No early satiety, no bloating. Yeah. What else? What are the other organs there, the upper compartment? Quick. What are the organs there?
Pancreas, stomach, and then we can consider the liver.
So there are no luminal symptoms, the stomach is out. Now, can it be liver or pancreas?
Yes.
In the background of this history?
It might be involvement of the pancreas.
Why do you say so?
Because the pain is aggravating that. That food is aggravating the pain.
Good. And it's a persistent pain. And there are no luminal symptoms. Okay. Yeah, that's a good solution. Yes. So what type of a pancreatic problem you think it could be?
It's most likely the patient is having the chronic pancreatitis, because he lost the weight, 5 kg weight in the last 3 months, having the anorexia. And
one possibility is it could be a pancreatic pathology, and etiology you think could be?
Etiology could be that because the patient for taking the 25 years is taking the alcohol, so it might be that alcohol induced chronic pancreatitis.
So why should he have loss of weight and appetite?
That recent change of loss of weight, loss of appetite might be possibility of underlying that some malignancy, development of malignancy.
Malignancy where?
Malignancy.
Where
The
do you think
pancreatic malignancy, sir.
Pancreatic malignancy. Where?
That
Where would the malignancy be? Head, body, tail? Any suggestion?
because there is no history of any head persistent pain aggravated with the foot. The head we can consider, sir. That, pancreatic head malignancy.
Jaundice would be a presentation, no, to the head mass.
can it be simply that he has an exacerbation of the chronic
Chronic
pancreatitis
pancreatitis, yes.
and worsening diabetes is worsened, and that is why he has got weight loss?
That's also possible.
That might be possibility because that.
Okay. Any comments, Professor Vinay Kumar?
I think my diagnosis will be that uncontrolled diabetes with complications like ketoacidosis and diabetic gut, including SIBO. And then the patient will be having a pancreatic involvement in the form of a carcinoma of pancreas. There will be because chronic pancreatitis, the duration of symptom will be more. This patient has got the abdominal pain only for a short period of time. And for the weight loss, you have significant, this malabsorption, which is not there here. So I will just go for pancreatic cancer here. And then other points to be taken from the history will be that he has got tuberculosis, whether this patient has got intestinal tuberculosis also because uncontrolled diabetes is there. And then the patient has got upper abdominal pain with a chronic alcoholic, for a long duration, whether the patient has got a cirrhosis with the development of HCC. So I think that will be my differential diagnosis in this particular patient.
Dr. Ismail?
I would go for chronic pancreatitis and exacerbation, probably complicated by malignancy in the body or tail region.
Yeah, I would also consider the same because the symptoms are getting aggravated with food, which I would not expect in HCC, but that is the other one where you'll have a continuous pain. So if you shortlist the upper abdomen, you'll have liver there, continuous pain, no relation to food intake. Number one, stomach will have urinary symptoms, early satiety, nausea, vomiting is not there. It can be even nodes, paratic nodes, where you can have retroperitoneal mass lesion that can also present as continuous pain. But however, that will not have any relation to food intake. So food intake puts you on guard, and therefore you're shortlisting as chronic pancreatitis. I think that's the way I would think.
Okay, can we proceed now?
Yeah, let's proceed. Yeah. So, come on, read.
Labs that hemoglobin is 10.2.
Okay, can you, Vijosh, can you just suggest what all investigation you do? Quick, we have to very quick.
Fecal elastase that I want to do.
That's the first one you want to do?
That fecal fat estimation that whether the patient is...
Just quickly, Subhash, list out the investigations you want. Quick.
Yes.
Diagnostic test. What is the important diagnostic test that you would do in this patient?
That test
fecal,
for the...
Okay, fecal elastase, the next one. Next.
Fecal fat estimations.
Next.
While sitting in the OPD, what will be the thing which you will be writing for?
Another test, sir, that...
Apart from the routine things, what do you usually ask for a patient with abdominal pain sitting in the OPD?
That upper GI endoscopy that I would like to do, sir.
Come on, what else do we ask for?
You don't like a radiologist?
Yes, sir. Say, contrast that CT that contrast
ultrasound.
CT.
Yeah, don't jump for a CT. Don't keep on
Why
jumping
didn't you
for
do
a
an
CT.
ultrasound?
I will do the ultrasound.
How many times I've told you never to ask for a CT? Examiners get worked up, when you say CT is the first investigation.
Okay, now you look at it.
Yeah, so you can just ask for a plain X-ray abdomen. If you're in a public hospital, you can ask for an X-ray ultrasound of scan of the abdomen. And ask for the blood sugars uncontrolled. Ask the HbA1c, check that. Get a stool for stool fat, simple test. Why do you want to go for fecal elastase? Come on, read quick.
That lab is 10.2, total count is 7,420, platelet is 1.85, ESR is high, 82, and the fasting blood sugar is very high, 383, HbA1c is raised, 9.2, LFT, that total bilirubin is 2.1, and the
Conjugated.
0.8.
Conjugated is 0.8.
Conjugated 0.8, and AST/ALT is 72/47, and the serum alkaline phosphatase is high, 194, and total protein is 6.7. Albumin is almost.
Come down to ultrasound. Move on to ultrasound.
Yes. USG mild hepatomegaly, and the fatty liver, calcification head, body, and the tail region of the pancreas. MPD is dilated. It is 8 millimeter, no mass, and the bulky head region.
What's the next investigation? And CBD is 8 mm, no stones. Next investigation of choice.
That I would like to do CT, that pancreatic protocol. That
what else? CT. Okay, then.
CT, and
Dr. Krishnadas, please take over.
CA 99, that one.
99, good. Yeah.
So
CT
tumor marker that I would like to do. One.
What else?
And that MRCP that I would like to consider after that.
Should we move on?
We'll show whatever is available.
CT abdomen, that head of the pancreas, measuring 4 centimeter, multiple large calculi in the head and the body, MPD 9 millimeter, tail region, showed the large interductal calculi, SMA, SMV, supramagentic vein normally visualized, no nodes, few small hypodense area noted in the head. So US, that I would like to do the one US guided FNA of this mass, sir. The next.
Okay, I think that's it. Good.
The T99 is 227, that is high. And US is the mild hypoechoic area in the head of the region. Multiple calculi in the head and tail. MPD is 10 millimeter. FNA, no definite malignancy. FNAD, scanty tissue. No other investigations.
Will you do any other investigation? That's the question. But you have not made a diagnosis, no? What to do?
Yes. That IgG4, that tumor CA99 high. That
do you think you will seriously consider testing for IgG4 in this case?
No, sir. That.
Why? Is calcification a feature of IgG4 associated pancreatitis?
That usually that sauces pancreas, that and the.
So it is not.
It's not a feature, no?
It is not a feature. You should look for you should ask for investigation which is relevant, not the entire thing available in the hospital. No, that is most important. Okay. So now tell us all these things. Read the question and give the answer. This is the usual OSCE style. Okay.
Yes. Prevalence of the pancreatic adenocarcinoma is the alcoholic pancreatitis and the tropical pancreatitis.
Give the answer.
The prevalence is adenocarcinoma in the tropical pancreatitis, and the alcoholic pancreatitis is about.
Leave it. Then anyone else? Bijosh?
20% around, up to 20%.
5%.
5 to 20%.
Is it same for alcoholic pancreatitis and tropical pancreatitis?
No, alcoholic pancreatitis, it is 4 to 5%.
Alcoholic is less.
Tropical?
Tropical it is high, sir.
Yeah, it depends upon the different study series. Some series have even reported up to 20 to 30%, but I would say that is all biased studies. Dr. Ismail, from Amrita, you have a large series. What do you feel is the prevalence of CA in chronic pancreatitis?
I don't know the exact figures, sir, but tropical pancreatitis has got more prevalence than alcoholic pancreatitis.
That is definite. That at least the student should know. What is the difference in the presentation of alcoholic pancreatitis and tropical pancreatitis?
Sir, that tropical pancreatitis, usually that it is seen in the malnourished, that adolescent, they are coming with the recurrent acute pancreatitis, and they are ultimately leading into the chronic pancreatitis. alcoholic pancreatitis that develops in the patient, usually having the 5% of the alcoholic patient who are consuming 80 or more than 80 gram of alcohol for at least 5 to 7 years. And the presentation is that they are usually presenting as a or acute pancreatitis or recurrent acute or chronic pancreatitis.
Okay.
Presentation.
Okay.
How often you? Okay, that's. What is the role of tumor here? What is the genetics of tropical pancreatitis? If you don't know, just say don't know. It's okay.
Just read about it. Okay. Fecal elastase.
What is the fecal elastase in the workup of pancreatitis?
Yes, sir. If there is we are suspecting chronic pancreatitis and the exocrine insufficiency, so we have to do that fecal elastase.
When do you do enzyme replacement therapy in chronic pancreatitis?
When that fecal fat is steatorrhea is present, that fecal fat estimation is 72 hours more than 7 gram, then we have to give or the patient is symptomatic, then we have to give the enzyme replacement therapy, or the patient is having the severe pain coming with that. Although it is not very helpful, but that we may try in that enzyme replacement therapy.
Many studies now say that for pain relief it may not be much useful. Okay, what is the principle behind dual label shielding test?
That dual phase shielding test
what is produced by the pancreas?
What is actually testing?
R factor.
Which activity of pancreatic secretion is being tested?
That protease that we have to check.
Okay.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah.
What is the role of EUs in the pain management in pancreatic disease?
One celiac axis block that we can do, sir, and and that neuron that block and neural assist that.
Okay, fine. Any questions from other examiners, Dr. Krishnadas? Yes.
I think it's not CP. It's not the neurolysis. It is a block, a celiac block in pancreatitis. Lysis is for CF pancreas.
Yes, correct. Dr. Ismail, any further?
I think it was okay, no? Not too bad.
Okay.
Except that he had difficulty
No,
in
sir.
the initial.
Continue.
Yeah, the initial presentation, Subhash, just remember, continuous pain, food related, keep that in mind and then come to a diagnosis, okay?
One suggestion to students is that mentally make a sort of summary of the important points in the history and findings, and important abnormal lab findings, because on that basis the questions may come. So you should not be sort of lost in the so many data which you are seeing in a short period of time.
Because in OSCE, they keep turning the slides, you can't go back. Okay, so you have to keep on noting down.
Ma'am, who is third?
Vivek is there? Vivek, Rohan?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes,
Vivek, take up this case.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, read please.
Yes, 23 years old female college student having history of dysphagia for solids and liquids, which is progressive over last 4 weeks, and can take only liquids now, that too with difficulty, and history of ingestion of toilet cleaner 1 glass 2 months ago, of suicidal intent, and issues with family were present. Was hospitalized immediately, and endoscopy was done, and was told to have damage to throat and food pipe. Was kept nil orally for 1 week and had some IV medications. Was on liquid diet for 2 weeks afterwards, and had pain mid-chest on swallowing, and noticed difficulty to swallow on attempting to eat semi-solids from 3rd week onwards. On physical examination, weight was 39 kg, BMI 17.2, pylorus present, mild finger clubbing bilaterally, and no scars in oral cavity. And systemic examination showed no findings except for poor nourishment. And hemoglobin 9.1, total count 9,200, platelets 1.85 lakhs, RBS 84, creatinine 1.1, and serum proteins total 6.7 and albumin 3.1. Proceed further. So,
patient is in front of you. How will you manage?
Yes, sir. I will first stabilize the patient and with IV fluids and hydration, and I will like to do upper GI endoscopy as first investigation for this patient, considering the history of toilet cleaner ingestion. and I'm suspecting corrosive stricture in this patient.
You will do upper GI endoscopy.
Vivek, can I barge in now? I was
Yeah, sure.
away for some time. Vivek, this patient is sitting in front of you. What do you think is the diagnosis?
Yes, this is most likely, sir, corrosive stricture, considering recent history of toilet cleaner ingestion, and afterwards, initially there was difficulty in swallowing.
Where is the corrosive injury?
Sir, esophageal injury.
So when you're giving a diagnosis, you should actually mention and specify further. Just saying corrosive is not good enough. You have to specify. Here's a patient who has got dysphagia, so you know it's esophagus. Okay. Now, why did you go in for an endoscopy straight away? What are your aims of doing the endoscopy?
Yes, sir. The aim for endoscopy is to find the site of stricture, and as already, if possible, during that sitting, I will go for stricture dilatation, and
so you'll go straight away for endoscopy. Do you see any risks involved in going in straight away for an endoscopy?
in this. There is
in a patient presents to you with dysphagia, what would be your first investigation?
I will go ahead with barium swallow first to find out site of stricture or obstruction.
So the barium swallow. So you want to see what is the site of obstruction?
Yes, sir.
What additional information are you planning to do you want out of the barium swallow?
Sir, I will examine the site of obstruction, any rat tail deformity or any feature suggestive of carcinoma.
What did you say? Rat tail deformity?
Sir, for actually, sir, that is for carcinoma, but any other complications associated with,
like, you are thinking of carcinoma in this patient?
No, sir.
Then why did you say rat tail deformity? So basically, you're looking at barium swallow because you want to see, you want to get a real road. You want to have an idea about what the esophageal lumen is like, where is the stricture, what are the number of strictures. These are the information. Only then you will embark on an endoscopy. You understand?
Yes.
So going in straight away for an endoscopy is always fraught with risks. Okay, carry.
Barium swallow showed stricture mid-esophagus 4 cm. And endoscopy showed carried mucosa of esophagus stricture at 25 cm, and scope would not be passed beyond. How to proceed further? Okay, sir. So, this is barium esophagogram showing on the right side. It is showing stricture almost 4 cm in length. And
how will you read the barium esophagogram? Could we go on to the barium esophagogram?
Sorry, sir.
I want you to actually give your comments of this barium esophagogram.
Yes, sir. There is shouldering just above the site of stricture, and there is a smooth tapering of esophageal lumen below that.
So what does this suggest to you?
So as this is smooth tapering, so this is most likely to be a benign stricture.
But then you said shouldering, and shouldering is indicative of something else. Isn't it? What else do you see? What else do you see in this barium esophagogram? Do you think that the proximal esophagus is dilated?
Yes, sir.
You have to mention that. What does that indicate to you? If there is a proximal dilatation, what is it indicating?
Sir, there is significant obstruction below the level.
It's been there for some time. It's a significant obstruction of stenosis, which has been there for some time. And that's leading to the
pre-stenotic dilatation, isn't it? And then what else are you, what important negative findings are there? See, when you're looking at a barium histogram in a corrosive, you are looking at, you want to look for something. What is
there is no perforation or fistula formation.
There's no fistula formation, there's no leak, nothing of that sort. Okay, these are all important negatives which you must mention the same thing. There only the examiner thinks that you know everything. Okay? Okay, carry on.
Vivek, one important thing, when you do a barium esophagogram, what happens is there's something called streamlining, you know. So it may in fact just be a 2 centimeter stricture. Because it's a streamlining effect, you'll find that the barium just goes as a straight line below. So what we used to do, we used to inflate air, you know, at that particular site. And when you inflate air, you'll find that actually it's only a 2 centimeter lesion and you can see the air column below that. I hope you understood that.
I think just because the esophagus is having a stricture, the barium will trickle and the esophagus because the stricture will not open up enough to show its normal diameter. So you may think that there is a long stricture. That is what you want to tell.
Yeah, so it's called a streamlining. It just takes a center part and it will not fill up. So what we used to do, we will inject air at that site, you know, the site of stricture by doing the endoscopy. And then you find the actual site of stricture and you'll find the air column below that.
Okay, so you will get an air esophagogram. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, please answer. These are the.
So what should you do with the patient? No, just tell how you manage this
patient.
I
make a point here? Can I make a point here? When you make the diagnosis here, you say there is a dysphagia, and then you have to a sort of quantification will be here. I think there should be a subjective global assessment about nutrition here, which is very important for understanding and management here. So here the patient has got a lost weight and has got a body mass index of less than 17.5. So I think make the diagnosis of severe malnutrition. It's a stricture, but it's a dysphagia, but severe malnutrition. Okay, so I think that's very important probably in the management of the patient, also, in the understanding of the patient. Thank you.
So instead of going through all these questions, how do you manage this patient? Scope is not going through. What should you do?
Yes, ma'am. So if scope is not going through, I will use under fluoroscopy guidance. I will put a guide wire across the stricture, and after that I will proceed ahead with dilatation of the stricture using Severi Gellert dilator. Starting from if I am not able to pass the adult scope, then I will start with 5 mm, and I will gradually dilate. And every sitting I will dilate till maximum 3 mm according to rule of 3. Once I will feel the resistance.
What
after
is
that,
the rule of 3?
Yes, once during the dilatation, when I feel the resistance during dilatation, after that I can dilate up to more 2 mm. So if I am feeling resistance at 7 mm.
Just repeat that. Just repeat that. Yeah, you have resistance at 5. So what will be the next one?
Then next one will be 7 mm, and after that I will stop. I will not dilate.
It is a 5, 6, and 7.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so only when you have all the dilators can you follow the rule of 3. You cannot follow the rule of 3 if you have alternate numbers. Remember that.
So
it's
how long
important.
you will keep on dilating this patient? At what frequency?
Yes, sir. I will dilate him every 2 weeks for maximum of 5 sittings. Even after that, I am not able to achieve a diameter of 14 mm of esophagus. Then it is refractory stricture. Then I will proceed with surgery in that case.
Is there any drug which is injected locally which can alter the stricture formation?
Yes, sir. Fluticasone can be injected locally for healing of inflammation.
Is fluticasone available injection?
Triamcinolone.
Indian studies are with the triamcinolone. Any other drug? Some people also inject mitomycin.
Which is the center from where maximum publications on corrosive stricture have come out in India?
Yay.
Who is the person? Name of the person.
Rakesh Kochar.
And Dr. Brewer, S.L. Brewer. The other, S.L. Brewer is a pioneer, followed by Rakesh Kochar.
And do you think it's an
students say.
inflammatory stricture or a fibrous stricture? Because it's only short duration, you know. History is of 2 months duration. Okay.
Yes, sir. Less likely to be fibrotic stricture right now.
Why do you think it's a why not it's an inflammatory stricture, you know? And what is the natural history like if you feel it's a fibrous stricture, you know? In the case of inflammatory stricture also, if you take a barium, it might look like the same. What is the difference, you know, if this inflammatory stricture, how do you dilate, and what is the complications and the precautions that you would like to take, you know, and then versus fibrous stricture?
If it is an inflammatory stricture, there is more chances of perforation due to ongoing inflammatory activity. And
so when will you start the dilatation in the case of corrosive?
When do you start the dilatation?
After a corrosive injury.
After 3 months of injury, I will.
You wait for 3 months.
What is prophylactic dilatation? What is early dilatation? What is prophylactic dilatation?
Okay, I think.
Okay, I think let them read all these, no?
Okay, just read all these things, make a note of all these questions which may have.
Yeah.
The second one is important because invariably, if you have examiners from the north, you'll be asked.
Zerger's classification in corrosive injury. So class 1 is erosions and erythema. Class 2A is superficial ulceration. Class 2B is deep ulceration. 3A is focal necrosis, and 3B is circumferential necrosis.
So early dilatation, you have to read. Refractive stricture, you know. And different type of dilators, you already mentioned Savary-Giller. Can you use balloon dilators in this situation?
No.
CRE balloon can be used, sir, but...
What are the indicators for balloon dilatation?
Yes, when there is corrosive injury to stomach also, and we are not able to, we are not having we are not having that much length to pass the Savary-Giller dilator. That time we can use CRE balloon.
Can you use
what sort of balloon? Is it a compliant balloon or non-compliant balloon?
It is a compliant balloon, sir.
What is the difference?
In sir, compliant balloon, according to the pressure, the diameter will the diameter will not change much. While in non-compliant balloon, when there is more pressure, the diameter will change.
Is it so?
It just confused there.
Okay.
Give me an example of a non-compliant balloon. Then I will understand. Non-compliant balloon, example.
Biliary sphincteroplasty balloon is a non-compliant.
No.
EG-flex.
EG-flex. So you should know the difference, you know.
It is fixed, no?
As he is not well versed in conversion with this, can you just explain?
Yeah, compliant balloon is something that, you know, it actually mold, you know, as you have initially pointed out, you know, it changes. You don't actually, when you dilate it, non-compliant balloon, it will go to the particular diameter, whatever is the resistance. Either the balloon breaks or the structure breaks, esophagus breaks. In the case of an achalasia dilation, EG-flex, you know, well, the circular smooth muscles will break. That is the purpose also. Okay. In the case of a compliant balloon, you know, then it actually will not attain that sort of a diameter if the resistance is too much. So it is protective. In the case of stricture, you use a compliant balloon. Is it clear now?
Okay. I think you read the role of stent and surgery. And will you use a gastrostomy to feed a patient with extremely severe dysphagia and dilatation with the usual Savary-Giller? Can you do gastrostomy?
Sir, gastrostomy can be done, but if provided if there is no corrosive injury to stomach also, that case, if patient is not able to have proper feeding, then we can, and already there is loss of weight, we can start on gastrostomy tube feeding.
Jejunostomy or gastrostomy, which one would you prefer?
I will prefer jejunostomy, ma'am.
Okay, I think you should say jejunostomy, because in an extremely severe case, the surgery may have to be contemplated. We may have to pull up the stomach. So we don't want the stomach to adhere to the anterior abdominal wall when we do surgery. Okay, now think the surgeon may be able to remove all the adhesions and all, but this is an old style thinking that it is better to have a jejunostomy feeding rather than a gastrostomy feeding. Okay, thank you. That's the end of the case. Next person, please.
Rohan?
Yes, ma'am. I'll take up the case.
Yeah.
Sure. So this is a 28-year-old. This is a 28-year-old homemaker with complaints of loose stools on and off for 1 year, weight loss, and easy fatigue. History of large volume stools without any blood or mucus. Abdominal pain. Stools are 3 to 4 times per day. Nocturnal symptoms are present, and the symptoms are worsened by milk intake. Diarrhea lasts for 3 to 4 days and improves temporarily with treatment, and recurs within 2 weeks. And same pattern has been continuing for last 1 year. Occasional vomiting about 1 to 2 hours after food intake. Semi-digested material. No blood, no foul odor. And she has noticed weight loss of 7 kg over last 1 year. She can't tolerate spices due to burning sensation of mouth since the past 3 months. There is no history of fever. She has scanty periods for the last 6 months, and she had taken multiple courses of antibiotics and metronidazole during the last 1 year.
Okay, just summarize this.
Can I just? Yes, sir. So, do I give a syndromic diagnosis or just summary of the history, sir?
What
if
do
you
you
can
make
straight
out
away
of
go.
this history? Just analyze this history and what is your inference from this?
Yes, sure. Yes, sir. So just to summarize, this is a 28-year-old lady, homemaker, with a history suggestive of a small bowel type of diarrhea, which is pathological due to the presence of nocturnal symptoms, and with a history that additional history that symptoms are worsened by milk intake, and with occasional bouts of vomiting, and in the presence of extraintestinal manifestations such as probably chelosis or stomatitis, with scanty periods or oligomenorrhea, and with history of malabsorption in the form of weight loss for 7 kgs over the past 1 year, and partially being treated in the past with multiple courses of antibiotics and metronidazole, including metronidazole during the last 1 year.
And it is painless.
A painless type of diarrhea.
That's most important, no? It's painless.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So what do you think this patient has?
So my syndromic diagnosis would be a small bowel type of diarrhea. And I would like to give a differential diagnosis for this case. A small bowel type of diarrhea complicated by malabsorption and in the presence of extraintestinal manifestations.
Nutritional deficiency. It's not extraintestinal manifestation.
We won't call it extraintestinal. It's a part of the nutritional deficiency.
Nutritional deficiency. How do you explain the vomiting? How do you explain the vomiting?
Vomiting. Vomiting contains semi-digested food material, and these are occasional episodes. There can be 2 possibilities. One is there are bouts of there is evidence of partial bowel obstruction, or it could be disaccharidase deficiency, or sometimes an atypical manifestation of small bowel disorders like celiac disease itself, which can present like vomiting.
Is a disaccharidase deficiency. How does it produce vomiting?
Where is it described?
She has intolerance to milk, and symptoms are so basically it will produce symptoms more like bloating and aggravation of diarrhea, which the patient complains of. And this could be either primary or a part of
No. The
disease
explanation for vomiting, that's what ma'am asked. Occasional vomiting. Do you want to add anything specifically or you want to ignore it?
No, sir. This is significant, sir. And vomiting occurs typically 1 to 2 hours after food intake, which indicates...
Does it help you to locate the disease? Upper small intestine, lower small intestine?
Bile, admixed, non-bile. Want to check out on that?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to know whether it is bilious type of vomiting or non-bilious. So, in this case, suggesting that it is a semi-digested material and occurs around 1 to 2 hours after food intake, and I would keep my location of pathology to upper small intestine, either the duodenal or the proximal.
Okay, syndromic is okay. Etiology?
So, etiology for differential diagnosis, I would, considering this symptom complex, I would consider the first probability of celiac disease in this case. I would also like to know the epidemiology, whether this patient is from South India or North India. That would help in framing the etiology further. The second possibility that I would consider in this case would be tropical sprue or tropical malabsorption, tropical enteropathy. And the third possibility I would like to keep in this case would be a small bowel type of Crohn's disease or inflammatory bowel disease.
Without
Another
pain?
possibility.
Without pain?
Unlikely. So I would like to
causes?
keep it much lower in the differential.
Any immune deficiency state?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to consider the possibility of combined variable immune deficiency or selective IgA deficiency as well as the possibility of the small bowel type of diarrhea. I would also like to keep other differential. Sorry, ma'am.
Can it be IPSID?
IPSID, yes, ma'am. IPSID is a small bowel type of B-cell lymphoma, which will also be a part of the differential. Along with that, I would like to consider rarer differentials much lower in the order, such as autoimmune enteropathy. And
not autoimmune enteropathy. Come on. What's the presentation of autoimmune enteropathy? They're all watery diarrhea.
Yes, ma'am.
They don't present as malabsorption.
Yes, ma'am.
Don't list out all the causes. Can it be tuberculosis?
An intestinal form of tuberculosis more likely involves the ileocecal region. So vomiting and small bowel type of diarrhea is unlikely in tuberculosis. So I would like to keep that much lower.
Any parasitic infestation?
Giardiasis can present like this with malabsorption and chronic type of diarrhea, but more common in immunosuppressed or in patients with combined variable immunodeficiency or selective IgA deficiency.
Strongyloid, yes.
Among all the things which you mentioned, can you just mention at least a short list? Give us a 3 differential diagnosis in the order of priority.
So considering this is South India, I would first keep a differential of tropical sprue in this case, followed by celiac disease. And the third possibility in this case, I would also like to consider small intestinal bacterial overgrowth as one of the differentials.
So that will be a third. Okay.
Yes.
You did not mention HIV.
We'll proceed.
Yes.
It's a 8-year-old female, HIV infection.
Yes.
Infection is very important.
I think any diarrhea of sufficient duration with weight loss, this has to be kept in mind.
Yes.
Okay, can we proceed?
Yeah, please.
So on physical examination, the patient appeared to be poorly nourished with pallor, glossitis, chelosis, dry skin, and without any evidence of skin lesions. There were no Bitot spots. There was mild bilateral pedal edema without any evidence of lymphadenopathy. Her weight was 36 kgs. BMI was 16.6. Vitals were normal. Systemic examination did not show any abnormal findings. Per rectal examination was normal without any evidence of any growth. So to summarize our examination findings,
Just list out the important salient investigations.
Yes, ma'am. Apart from the routine...
Continue.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So apart from the routine investigations, which will give me an evidence, I would like to see for the type of nutrient which is malabsorbed in this case. So I would like to test for stool for fecal fat levels, stool Sudan fat-free test, acid steatocrit test, and apart from this, I would like to see for liver function test, liver biochemistry, the total protein levels. Is there any albumin globulin reversal? I would also like to see for basic inflammatory parameters like ESR and C-reactive protein. Along with that, I would like to perform an investigation which will help in clinching the diagnosis. Probably would be an upper GI endoscopy with biopsies from the deep duodenum as far as possible. So this is...
Just name the 3 tests of malabsorption.
Yes, sir. So
what are the 3 tests of malabsorption?
A D-xylose test is...
Just name them. D-xylose, number 1, number 2.
Number 2 is stool fat.
Number 3.
So, and
B12. B12
vitamin B12.
B12 acid.
That will help in localization of the malabsorption.
These are the 3 tests of malabsorption. Okay. So this you should know. Okay, and you have to stick this to for parasites. Most important would be what? Your immune deficiency state you're thinking, no?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like IgM, IgA.
The antibody panel, yes, ma'am. So apart from...
What will be the role of duodenal biopsy in this patient? What will be the role of duodenal biopsy?
Yes, so on duodenal biopsy...
BT, can we move on? What will be the role of duodenal biopsy?
On duodenal biopsy, I would like to see for any evidence of any intraepithelial lymphocytes or any evidence of celiac disease or tropical screw in the form of crypt-villus height ratio. I would like to see for villus atrophy, crypt hyperplasia, and then grade the disease accordingly. I would also like to rule out conditions such as IPSID, where the small intestinal biopsy will give the pathological lesion in that case.
What will be the finding in IgA deficiency? CVI.
In
IgA deficiency. What will be the finding in IgA deficiency? Yeah.
I can, in the duodenum, I may find Giardia.
Plasma cells will be reduced. It will be A-gamma globulinemia.
A-gamma.
Yeah. So those are the things that you look for on histology. So here you find that thyroid is near normal, cortisol.
So the lab value suggests...
No, just move on. Let's move on. Colonoscopy is normal. Do we have next slide? CT shows thickening of proximal jejunum, luminal narrowing at 4 centimeters. OGD is normal. D2 appeared mildly edematous with biopsy. So I think that's what we decided. So what do you think is the cause of this narrowing? There it is. That's what I said.
There is thickening of proximal. Yes, ma'am. There is thickening of proximal jejunum with luminal narrowing. So,
so what are the possibilities now?
It could be a lymphoma should be ruled out.
Yeah, IPSID, lymphoma. Lymphoma should be
IPSID.
Can it be eosinophilic enteritis?
a mucosal variant of eosinophilic enteritis can present in this manner with the small bowel type of diarrhea.
But they'll present more as diarrhea, okay? Less of
Diarrhea.
malabsorption, mucosal. Yeah.
Less of malabsorption.
So what's the histology slide there? What does it show? What do you think it is?
This is a plasma cell.
Plasma cell.
No.
Just to describe.
Just describe.
What see?
Describe what you see.
I think once you have seen this picture, you will never forget.
So there's a cell with a very cellular cytoplasmic
okay,
halo.
just see, the cells are very small. You can see the nucleus, no, they're very tiny, and this is very big. This is a procession of strongyloid circularis. Okay. Strongyloid. So this is actually, look at the entire list of questions. If you don't know the answer, you will not be able to write in a single question properly. So the entire diagnosis is based on that histology slide, and therefore you must have an idea about how this parasitic infestation biopsy will look like. Okay, you go and read that book, and you will find the same picture there. It is so classic.
Okay.
What are the risk factors of strongyloidosis?
For stool, I would like to check for stool parasite.
Risk factors. Sir is asking for risk factors.
Risk factor. So immunodeficiency or immunosuppression, patients with HIV/AIDS, patient on long-term steroids, post-transplant patients. These are the ones I would like to consider as risk factors for strongyloidosis.
How do you treat it?
And
how do you treat it?
Treatment for strongyloidosis would include anti-helminthic like albendazole and
albendazole.
No.
What will be the yield of strongyloid on stool examination? These are the questions that we asked, okay? They're all tricky questions. So you must know the life cycle of strongyloid. So stool yield is almost zero. It is always taken up only on dural biopsy. You must know the drug treatment. You must know what is hyperinfestation syndrome, which are the immune deficiency state that you've addressed. Okay, so read all these. These are the things that you need to know.
So all these things, what is given here, you must be thorough. Okay. The drug is actually thiabendazole. Now you can use praziquantel and other drugs as well.
Yeah.
Next is
from your side.
Yeah. Sadish, are you there?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sadish, are you there?
Vijosh, take it up.
Yeah, sir.
Satish is there.
Hello.
Satish, are you there?
Hello. Yeah. I'm Sadish. Yeah, I'm here, sir.
Okay. Next question.
Hello?
Next is Gus. Okay, read it.
Audio is not good.
I think Sadish.
68-year-old male with long-standing diabetes.
Audio is not good.
Long-standing diabetes, hypertension, and dyslipidemia on treatment, and CAD, and had a stent placement 6 months ago. On aspirin 60 mg and clopidogrel 75 mg. Since then, patient have a dyspepsia of 2 weeks. No abdominal weakness followed by a syncopial attack 2 days ago. Black, loose, foul-smelling stool since yesterday. No vomiting of blood. Noticed a mild effort intolerance after the syncope, and there is no chest pain. Sir, next slide. Presented to ED with a pulse of 110 per minute, BP of 140 by 92 and SpO 97%. Patient is conscious, and abdomen there was no hepatosplenomegaly, mild epigastric tenderness, and seriously mild systolic murmur in aortic area. ECG showing T-wave inversion from V4 to V5.
Dr. Ismail, please take over. Dr. Ismail is there?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, please discuss this case.
Yeah, you can go through the questions and answer.
Sir, which are
the scoring systems used to assess the Hello?
Patient in the situation. Hello?
Yeah,
I can hear you, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
We are waiting to hear from you. Please go ahead.
Sir, one is Glasgow Blatchford scoring system.
Yes.
Then
it not take so much time, no?
Okay, how will you manage this situation?
Sir, Rockwell system is there.
Okay,
there are many systems like Rockwell system. These are to triage the patient. Then the AIM-65 and another one. Then you have the Glasgow scoring system, etc. How will you manage this acute situation?
Sir, I will stop the patient is a known case of CAD has stent in 6 months back. So then a patient was on antiplatelets. I will first. Hello, can you hear?
Yeah, go ahead.
I will continue stop the. I will continue aspirin. And, I'll put the
your audio is the problem.
Ask someone else to take over.
Hello.
Okay, please. You will continue with aspirin or will not continue?
Sir, I will continue aspirin. I'll stop clopidogrel.
You will stop clopidogrel, but continue aspirin. Why do you say he has a stent in situ which was inserted as placed 6 months ago? The usual pattern is that for 1 year, 2 antiplatelets drugs will have to be continued. So how can you stop it and then create a much graver situation? The cardiologist will be behind your neck if you produce myocardial infarction in addition to this. So the general rule is that you don't manipulate with 2 antiplatelets until 1 year unless there is a grave contraindication. Okay. Apart from that, what do you do actively to this patient?
How will you assess the hemodynamics? That's the question.
Sir, I will assess. I will put a Ryle's tube first. Then I will see.
Now, why do you want to waste time by putting Ryle's tube and all? What is the indication for Ryle's tube?
Sir, it's in emergency. Actually, patient in emergency. So I will put Ryle's tube and see its active bleeding is there. Then send the investigations and will plan for a OGD scopy in this patient. Hello.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Ismail, you wanted to ask a question.
No, I just want to how will you assess the hemodynamic of the patient? Because that is the most important. No, unless you correct his hemodynamics and you send the patient for endoscopy, the patient is going to crash.
Which are the simple tests in the OPD which will tell you in the emergency department will you tell you that he is hemodynamically unstable. Pulse, blood pressure, postal hypotension.
Orthostatic hypotension. Yes.
Okay.
BP and pulse rate and SpO2. This is I will measure.
All right. This is the hemoglobin.
Hello. How? HB is 8.5 with TC of 5,200.
Just tell, I think just proceed. This is the endoscopy finding. What should you do?
Sir, endoscopy shows a gastric ulcer on the lesser curvature, linear insura and 1.5 centimeter, visible clot with mild oozing and no varices. Duodenum is normal. So in this patient,
what will you do? Just tell us.
Class. I will clip. I will apply.
What are the 1 minute? What are the things you keep ready in the tray so that you can proceed with the management of this patient? Quickly tell, and what would you do?
So I will classify it into forest classification 2B. I will keep ready adrenaline, then clip hemoclip, then
Okay.
Josh?
Clot removal
Yes,
to
ma'am.
be done, sir.
Just quickly tell.
The forest class 1B ulcer. So I will consider for a epinephrine injection, 4-quadrant injection, providing a vasoconstriction, followed by a second therapy with a thermal probe or a clip applicator or a grasper.
Good. So
Roll of
dual
PPI.
that is what you
Roll of PPI. That's what you
initial
would start
phase-
in the. That's what you would
initial
start
phase
in the
before-
emergency, no ED. In the emergency department, you first start with the PPI, no.
PPI, sir. Yeah, madam.
Yeah. So who's done the study on that PPI and gastric ulcer? Vijosh, quickly tell. Just move on.
I don't know.
Kuru, yeah, Zankar and Kuru. They're the ones
okay?
who
Do you use APC in this situation?
In this situation,
Can you use APC in this situation?
In this situation, active bleeding is there, so APC will not be effective.
Okay.
Would you like to dislodge the clot?
If clot is there, then we'll remove this clot after injection with epinephrine and providing the vasoconstriction. I will remove the clot with a snare, then decide upon the further whether there's a vessel or not. Depending on that, I will decide.
VT, you discuss about that removal of clot and not.
Okay. So as we are nearing 9:30, we will rapidly rush to the next case. Please read about the management of ulcer with clot, spot, visible vessel with clot, oozing, and all those things. Okay. There is no role of APC in bleeding like this. APC is only for superficial lesions. Next is Dr. Ramnish.
Yes. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
This is a 22-year male college student with a recurrent periumbilical abdominal pain 1 year, and intermittent loose stools are there with weight loss of 5 kg per year. History of perianal abscess is which was drained 18 months ago. Investigated and found to have a terminal ileum, and cecal involvement is there. And biopsy showed non-casating renal loan. Patient was put on ATT for 6 months and initially gained 2 kgs of weight, but and some symptomatic improvement was. Sir, the patient is but symptoms reoccurred 2 months later with abdominal pain and diarrhea. Painful small swelling in the leg on the left side 1 month ago, and painful swelling of perianal area with the pus discharge is there. Weight was 57 kg, BMI 18.9 with a vital stable. Edema nodosum on left shin was found. Abdominal finding was mild right iliac fossa tenderness, no mass, and perianal area, indurated area at 5 o'clock position is there with a drainage of pus on the pressure. And per rectal examination, there is a mild tenderness and tract could not be felt. Other systems and found to be normal in no abnormalities seen. So syndromic diagnosis is this is a young patient with a periumbilical pain and loose stool is there. So with the associated perianal fistula and the perianal abscess also there with the extraintestinal manifestation of edema nodosum. So first DD will patient. Other thing is a patient was treated for with ATT for 2 months. A patient recently gained the weight, but not found to be symptomatically improved. So first syndromic diagnosis looks like it's a Crohn's disease, IB, inflammatory bowel disease.
Locate the site, doctor.
Manifestation.
Locate the site. You cannot just give a huge diagnosis Crohn's disease. No, say Crohn's disease, ileitis with perianal, and give the scoring. No, give your Montreal classification. You've got the age, you've got the site, you've got everything, even from the history taking. So what will be the Montreal classification?
Montreal classification includes them. It's the location.
Yeah, location you have. It is small intestine is definitely there, no? You've got perianal symptoms. You've got small intestine involvement. At least to some extent, you can decide, no? Don't just say Crohn's. Important is, yeah. Don't just say Crohn's disease. Please highlight what are the possible locations in this patient.
Ileum, first ilitis is there. Plus
so small bowel. So small bowel definitely is there, and perianal symptoms are definitely there. Okay. Okay. Next slide. Just move on. Next slide.
Investigations was hemoglobin 10.2, total count 4,500, platelets 4.5 lakhs, ESR 48, CRP 28, and total protein 5.6, albumin 2.9. LFT was found ACLG 4338, alkaline post normal. Colposcopy also nodular lesion in the cecum area with the elliptical valve ulcerated and terminal ileocecal small ulcer. Biopsy was a chronic inflammation and no gene expert found to be TB negative.
BT, this is after the ATT?
Yeah.
Okay.
After 2 months of ATT.
After 2 months of ATT.
So?
What's your diagnosis?
First, we confirm the diagnosis of biopsy. Nodular lesion biopsy will
Nothing
take.
is there, no? It's inconclusive. It's inconclusive.
So what?
Patient is a young patient. This is a young patient.
In the situation where you have done a repeat, can you just listen? In the situation where you have a, you know where are the disease? There is a terminal ileal disease, ileocecal disease, and perianal disease. Erythema nodosa. Biopsy, only chronic inflammation, and there is no granuloma. So how will you go about? Is that enough to treat the patient as Crohn's disease? Are you there?
Yes, sir. Sir, actually, patient is under a high risk category. So we can proceed with the biologics, sir. We can proceed. And
you don't want any radiological imaging, huh?
Small bowel CT enterography we have to do. Tool for any fistulas are there or not in the.
So who will answer that? So you need to do. You must have an imaging, no?
So, yeah. You have to take a deeper section of the biopsy you have sent. If that is not when used, you may have to repeat the biopsy. You have to actively look for evidence of Crohn's disease. You have to do an MRI of the perineum to look at the details of the perianal disease. And if you don't have the details of the intestinal involvement, CT or MR enterography. That much things will have to be done. And of course, an X-ray chest or a CT chest to actively rule out pulmonary tuberculosis if you are planning to give biologicals. Okay. Now, how will you manage? This is the second episode of perianal fistula with infection. And how will you manage this?
It's in view of Crohn's disease, we directly with a high risk patient in view of a young age with the extensor manifestation and terminal ileum with the perianal disease involvement. So
don't keep repeating. Don't keep repeating. Okay, how do you manage the patient? Don't waste time repeating the same thing again and again. How do you manage? What are the drugs?
We start with the infliximab, the plus minus immunomodulators, azathioprine we can add, ma'am. And other choices are vedolizumab we can go for. And
is this the way you'd answer? You have all the drugs. You have infliximab, you have adalimumab, you have adalizumab, or you have everything. Tell us, what would you do with the patient? The patient is in front of you. How will you talk to the patient?
We start go ahead with the infliximab plus immunomodulators, and after 3 months we reassess the patient with on the clinical basis, and if the patient is improving, then we continue the same therapy. And after 9 months of the treatment, we go for the repeat colonoscopy to look for the endoscopic remission is there or not.
Dr. VT, just intervene and just tell them how they should answer this.
Okay. Now he has a perianal disease. The first thing we have to treat the infection first, because with an active infection or even an abscess there, if you're going to give infliximab, it will create a lot of problem for you. And the initial management is actually with the
ciprofloxacin
and nitro-imidazole, especially ciprofloxacin or metronidazole, and that is given for a long period, not the usual 1 week or 2 weeks. It may have to be given for 3 4 weeks or even 6 weeks. And that is how we start. And in fact, a large number of patients do respond. And in people who do not respond only, we think of other biologicals and other form of therapy.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, you have to know about the prevalence, the type of perianal fistula, the classification, management, of course, we have just discussed. And what are the other differential diagnosis of perianal suppurative disease? Have you heard of hidradenitis suppurativa?
Suppurativa, yeah.
Okay. Read lymphogranuloma, venereum, etc. Okay. Endoscopic difference between TB and Crohn's. Then the habit of giving ATT in all our patients. Should we do it? Okay. There are articles which have come recently. And what is the Bayesian model for differentiating ileocecal TB from Crohn's disease? That is the which most people talk about recently. What do you think that all suspected cases CD should be given a trial of ATT in our country because TB is very common? Are you there?
Actually, if there is a doubt is there about CD and TB, then better to go for the ATT trial for the 6 months. If a patient is responding and if he is sustaining for that,
this patient had actually perianal disease 18 months ago. Usually in a suspicious case, but you cannot differentiate between TB and Crohn's. If there's a perianal disease, that is more in favor of Crohn's disease.
Exactly.
So I think we should have erred on the side of Crohn's disease initially and not thought of tuberculosis. Because if you are going to treat every case of Crohn's disease with tuberculosis, the recent article from All India Institute says that you are delaying the diagnosis and probably increasing the chance of stricture formation.
Exactly. So only outliers are just 17%, 17% outliers, where you may have to give an ATT, but almost 85 to 90% you should be dot on diagnosis. I also believe in that. Yeah. And please read all the biologicals. Most important is the biologicals, you know, what are the trials? Yeah. You cannot just say, I will give infliximab, then you say, I'll give adalimumab. There are all these newer drugs coming up. Please read all the biologicals that are available in the market. What are the indications? What are the contraindications? When will you start azathioprine? Is there a role for steroid? Can you give this patient budesonide large controlled release because it's only an ileocecal pathology? There's nothing more than that. Or would you, because of the fistula, you start with the biological and in treating the infection first? Would you have to drain any abscess? You have to, you must have an imaging. Without an imaging, you cannot start the patient on treatment. You need an MRI. You need MRI of the pelvis. You all have to be, you know, many of you who are presented today are all, you all have to read a lot. You're not very assertive in your answers. You've just finished your theory. So you should be knowing your practicals. So, I mean, all the theoretical aspects, all the questions that were asked are all theoretical. You cannot be hesitant at all. Yes, VT can conclude.
Should we stop here or do the rapid fire questions?
No, just conclude now. Let them read. They've got lots to read.
Okay, Dr. Sarjan, please.
I know like it's almost already 8 and we have crossed the time usually. So thank you all for taking your valuable time off your busy schedule. It was a very important session. I think like all our PGs would be benefiting a lot. I should especially thank the teachers of the day, Jayanti ma'am, Varghese sir, G.N. Ramesh sir, Krishna sir, Ismail sir,
Vinay
Kumar sir, and my own chief. So everyone for chipping in with all the valuable questions and suggestions. We hope to meet you again soon next week, next Tuesday. So thank you once again, and thank all the PGs also for participating actively.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Dr. Ismail. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Bye, Dr. Ismail, GN, Professor Vinay Kumar, ma'am. Okay.
Bye.
See you next week.
Yeah.
Next
I'll just call
Tuesday.
you up now. I'll just call you up. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, fine.